6 o'clock. I'll call the meeting to order. Everybody hear me okay? Julie, can you hear? Okay, great. All right, so we just barely have a quorum. So I'm just gonna go through for members here, but Scott is not here. Jeff is here in his absence. Julie is with us. Lisa is with us. Kelly is not making it. Then no longer is sitting on the board. So we have 4, so we do have a quorum to move forward. So I'm looking for a motion to approve the agenda. If there's any additions or deletions.
I'll move.
Second.
Jeff and Lisa, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so approval of the agenda, and then approval of the meeting minutes from September 5th.
Move to approve.
I
Lisa,
will second.
Jeff. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So approved. We come to our first public comment. See in public. So now we're to you, Lane, your superintendent's report. Are you okay to do that?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, there we go. Hold on.
Give you a second here.
Okay, now try.
All right. How's that?
Much better.
So one of the first things that I kind of sent to the board about a week or so ago was a timeline for the budget process, which should probably be used for agenda planning for the next couple of board meetings, just to make sure that we're hitting all the timelines and have everything ready to go for the vote in January. There's going to be a written superintendent's report that goes out to the community just as a reminder. On October 6th, and it's going to focus on the recommendations for restructuring to give folks time to review it before we have the Green Mountain Open Forum, which will be on October 8th. And that's going to be the primary topic for the discussion. That meeting again is October 8th. It'll be at 6 p.m. and it'll be in the Chester Andover Media Center. The staff will also have input based upon that restructuring plan during their listening sessions that I'm going to have with them during the month of October. And then the admin team will come back together with all the input that we get. And if there's really good stuff, we'll adjust what the plan is. In addition, just as keep people updated, the Cavendish principal search is well underway. We've had 4 applicants. We have at least 1 or 2 that look like they would be just good interim people to get us through the year. The other 2 actually look like they could be good permanent fits. So the ideal would be to not have to make 2 transitions, right? Do an interim and then a permanent. And so we're really trying to get geared up for a successful interview search committee. I'm going to be meeting with the Cavendish teacher leaders on Monday to kind of hopefully outline the interview process. And we're going to begin inviting parents to participate as well. The hope is that we're able to start interviewing maybe by the end of next week, if not very early the week after. And I do want to commend the Cavendish staff for their hard work, keeping things running smoothly in this time of transition. They really are to be commended for that work. Since this is the TRSU board, and I think Todd will probably speak a little bit to this during his facilities report, Ludlow Mount Holly, we've been having discussions about going out to bond to fix some kind of critically needed areas of work, repair work. Ludlow Elementary is badly in need of a new roof and windows on one wing of the building. Cavendish is needing significant work, we're finding, due to repairs that have been deferred. But a lot of this was uncovered in a much greater extent during the boiler installs. The main power supply line that connects to the school building has been coming undone and needs to be repaired. Todd will probably talk a little bit about that. And then the other thing that was discovered is that the roof is in really bad shape at Ludlow Elementary. So it's possible repair or possible full replacement. And so we'll see what goes on there. But that's the big things that are happening in and around the district right now.
Just to clarify, those building are at the roof repairs are at Mount Holly.
So there have been leaks at Ludlow Elementary. So there is work that needs to be done there. And given the age of the roof, probably a roof replacement is in order. But they've also discovered quite a bit of problems with the Mount Holly roof as they were doing the boiler install. There are places where the tiles are bubbled up. There are places at the peak of the roof where the tiles are missing and there's been water infiltration. The folks that were actually up on the roof kind of walking around a little bit were also concerned about how flexy things were. So I know that, one of the things that we talked about earlier this week was getting a roofing expert or an engineer to come out and just make sure that the thing was going to hold up under the winter snows that are coming.
Great. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Lane? Julie?
The news about the Mount Holly roof is new, I believe, because when EEI came and did its assessment of the buildings, that wasn't one of the flagged issues. I thought at the time, it seemed like that was one area that we sort of got lucky with, but I guess not. But the Ludlow roof, we have known about the faulty aspects of the insulation, and my memory, Todd, is that the recommendation at the time was that we would be able to repair and potentially save some aspects of the roof. Has the status of that assessment changed?
So when they did the infrared analysis, and I'm not going to speak directly to it because EEI did that underneath the premise that the bond was going to pass and but there was some water damage to the insulation. So they were talking, because of the age of the roof, doing a complete roof replacement there, because they're going to replace some air handlers on the roof at the same time. And it would just have been financially feasible to do it all at once. So could there, Julie? I would assume there could be probably some repairs instead of replacement, but I'm not sure. I mean, with the age of the roof, I would, if it's past its end of useful life, maybe it's worth thinking about a full roof replacement. But when I get to my report, I don't want to jump in on somebody else, and I'll clarify some of that stuff as we go along.
Great. Thank you for refreshing my memory. Thank you. I'm all set.
Good.
Any other questions for Lane?
I'm still here.
No, I was just seeing if anyone had any questions for you. Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to the TRSG Facilities Director's Report.
Okay, good evening, everybody. I just want to start off. I am at Springfield High School right now for their open house. Cheryl and I were invited. Anyway, it's open, but we got an invitation from Springfield to come and see the work that they'd done on their cafeteria, EEI. It was the engineering firm. They put in dehumidification here. It's beautiful. If anybody has a chance just to stop in and see the cafeteria, it's state of the art. So I came to see their work, and it's very impressive. It's very, very impressive, their cafeteria. So our supervisory union is in fairly good shape, I think is the way I'll phrase it. The high school, we're still working with, the state with our PCB issues. There's some movement on that. I don't want to say how much because there's still some funding issues, but there is some movement. Chester Andover, not really a lot to report. We got their problems with the air handlers fixed, and those are working flawlessly now. Cheryl and I are hoping we're on the last leg of our FEMA project, but each time we think that's happened, we take 2 steps forward and 4 steps backward. So we're hoping that that's going to change soon. Cavendish, it's just moving along. Same with Ludlow, no real big problems. The roof, Julie, you were exactly right. Maybe could be patched, but now the big talk is at Mount Holly. So the boiler project there is coming along, I would say flawlessly. We're maybe a week or so out from firing the boiler later than what we anticipated. They're thinking they're going to fire it tomorrow. Some very small issues, nothing major, nothing that I'm surprised about. The project's come along really good, but we ran into some issues that we didn't see coming. The main power coming into the building, somehow, nobody knows how, was damaged. The pole, the metal tower pole coming up is separated from the building. I've already got a price from the electrical contractors that were on site. This is something that needs to be done immediately. They're thinking they can do it next Friday. We're hoping to I sent in an authorization. The price was less than what we thought it was going to be. So they're going to take care of that. While they were on the roof, they found some significant damage to the roof at Mount Holly. So to the point where I got a hold of a roofing contractor and got him out there the next day to look at it. There's problems with the roof to the extent that we're worried about the snow load for this winter. They can fix the immediate problems that would get us through the winter, but we're looking at possibly a complete roof replacement, not all plywood, but changing all the shingles and just replacing the roof. There's more damage to the roof up there. When it was done, however long ago, it was done at the most minimal cost that could be, and it's starting to show now. So that is catching up to us in the long run. So I did ask this roofing contractor if he could give us a budgetary number so we would know what we're looking at, but by no means is a number that we're going to say we're paying this, because it would go out to bid, but it will give the school boards an idea of how much it's going to cost to replace that roof. And he's going to give me a price on how much it's going to cost to put the Band-Aid on it to get us through the winter, because they can't do the major roof replacement this fall. They don't have nobody's going to have the time for that, and we'll run out of weather to do it as well. So that's about all I got.
Who initially said the roof was in good shape for that? Like, how was this missing so severe?
So I think what happened, Adrian, is 2 years ago, I'm thinking 2 years ago anyways, maybe it was a little longer, when we talked about this, there was talk that we talked about putting the roof into the bond, and it was determined that the roof didn't really need to be replaced. Now, these shingles, I don't know how long they've been missing, and I don't know how long, there's definitely some water damage on one spot. I mean, unless you were on top of the roof walking it, you wouldn't have seen it, but I don't know when it happened. I don't, it could have been, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Who missed it or missed?
If there's been 2 years in between assessment, I guess I misunderstood when Julie was talking about that. Like, initially, it was kind of clear it didn't, that was like a recent assessment, so. That's
No, this was a couple of years ago. It was a couple of years ago anyways. It wasn't a year ago. It was at least 2 years ago when we first started talking about what we wanted in the bond for LMH. And that was decided that they didn't want to do that because it had maybe 10 years left on the shingles, but the roof is in bad shape. Unfortunately, I hate giving bad news like that, but that roof is in bad shape.
Julie?
Todd, remind me, was replacing the HVAC at Mount Holly part of the original bond? Like, did we determine that was a need at the time?
They were gonna put a boiler in, new boiler, and they were gonna change some some ducting work and change over some heating. you know, obviously because the bond didn't pass, but we were in dire need of the boiler anyway. So LMH, obviously, Julie, you were part of that and decided, which was a great move, we're putting that boiler in, and it's going to be a lot more efficient. New pumps. I mean, I've seen those run. They're almost very silent. They're going to save money just on electricity. This is just a great addition for this school.
Yeah, no, and appreciate that it's going to be such a relief to everyone not to, you know, go day to day with that thing this winter. But I guess my question is, if we start talking about new roof and we were intending to do ductwork and things, I mean, you know, there's like a little bit of a snowballing, but like a reasonable degree. So I guess those would be things I'd want to know the answers to after you have some opinions from, you know, the subject matter experts here.
So I can tell you with the Mount Holly School, we could put the roof on under a small bond or a loan and not adversely affect doing an HVAC upgrade, right? Because the peak of the roof where the classrooms are is all a walkable space. Every engineer that's been up there said this will be the easiest HVAC project we do because it's so accessible, which won't have a direct effect on the roof. Now, I do have some good news about Mount Holly. So we all know that there's been a moisture problem underneath the crawl space of that building. So a company came in because my big concern was the boiler room itself. I wanted it to be moisture free. We got a brand new boiler in there with brand new electronic pumps. So we're going to put a dehumidifier, but they're going to seal the floor. And when the guy came, he crawled underneath the crawl space and he said, let me just give you a price on putting a 2-layered membrane, do some drainage around the edges. It's a very neat project. It'll drain all the water to one spot, put a pump in there, pump all the water out. Any moisture will be removed from that crawl space. So he gave me the price. It was nothing that I felt comfortable bringing before the board. EEI has decided that they saved a little bit of money. They're going to cover that whole cost and they're going to do that project for the school district. They're going to cover that and they're going to do it. So a little shout out to EEI. They did save some money on not having to reflue the chimney. We did put a direct vent right up through, so they didn't have to reflue it. They saved a little money, but they're eating a fairly good chunk of that to take care of that moisture problem. That's a huge savings for us for that school. That's going to help out a lot. So a little bit of good news.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I'll let everybody know when we get, at the LMH meeting, hopefully I'll have some little better idea of a budgetary number on that, on the roof.
Great, thank you, Todd. Right, there's no other questions for Todd. We'll move on to the curriculum director's report.
I'm going to jump out. I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm going to jump out because I am at Springfield and I'm holding up one of their spaces. I think they're trying to clean in here. They're custodians, so I'm going to jump off unless anybody thinks they need me later on.
I think we're all set. Thank you.
So thank you.
So my curriculum report is linked in the agenda. I'll go into extensive little presentation at the LMH and the GM board meeting, but essentially I focused on another one of our TRSU SIP goals, focused on math. Just highlighting how one of the change ideas that was articulated in spring that actually Julie with the math committee developing action plans that related to deepening student discourse and facilitating productive math discussions and related to instructional shifts that we want to see in our classroom. So that's really what the gist of the report is focused on, as well as what we're doing to improve student outcomes, which is really focusing on our grades 3 through 5 to close the gaps between marginalized students and students who have been historically privileged in grades 3 through 5. So we've been taking some baseline data, working with the state's systemic improvement plan funding that we've utilized the past couple of years. So we have a coach that we've been working with. We've taken some baseline data and are putting those plans into action in the coming weeks when we start our in-service day, which is on October 11th. Pre-K 6 teachers will be at Ludlow, 7 through 12 will be at Green Mountain to focus on improvement efforts related to their SIPs. Our benchmark period for our schools ends tomorrow, and with the extension for kindergarten benchmark through the 18th. So we'll have some benchmark data for our districts within the next month.
Any questions for Emma? Moving to financial update.
Right, you have September in your folder, which brings us to the end of our first quarter of the school year, which is scary how quickly that's gone by. Not a lot still going on. This is probably the quietest time of year that we have. Busy for us, but activity-wise, quiet. Transportation and central office are where I would expect them to be. Special ed is always our challenge because we have the kids coming in and out, and we still have open positions and people coming and going, and then needs for these students. So hopefully that'll settle out in the next month, and then I can start looking at like where we might be over and where we're saving as far as special ed goes. I'm also in the process of creating the service plan, which is all the needs for special ed kids, special ed services for FY26. In essentially, that has to go to the state, but that is also our jumping off point of budgeting for special ed. So it's an important report to do because it has two purposes. So, and our audit is complete, and hopefully we'll get drafts by mid-November.
Yeah, with the service plan for 26 being worked on now, if the GM board goes into some level of restructuring, would any of that impact that? I'm assuming it would, because the numbers would be the same.
No,
it'd just
because
be like
the
the station.
students would still be the services that we were basing the report on, so it doesn't matter where they're located, we would still.
Okay. Any other questions for Cheryl? Okay. Move into old business. So it's again about policy governance. I think now everybody has, except for maybe Kelly, I don't think she's been able to attend anything, has had some engagement with policy governance, either through the retreat, through the training, through discussions. So I'm hoping at this point, especially because GM is definitely engaging, and we're going to be more education, and we're going to be discussing adopting policy governance in our next meeting. I would like to, no, we can't have a forum. I'd like to talk about adopting policy governance at the TRSU level, not the individual boards at this point, but just the TRSU level, so that we can move forward and getting Lane's evaluation started and set up. So do you have any thoughts? One or the other?
Yeah, I just said at the workshop that we attended, there was an opportunity to ask about how the different boards adopting policy governance would interact. And one of the pieces I pulled away from that is that the TRSU goals and kind of directives would really be directly to the two other boards, right? So it would be the kinds of things where TRSU is saying, we want the boards to achieve these particular goals, or we want Lane to work with the boards in this particular way. Whereas the two individual boards are much more about the actual students in those classrooms as the recipients or ends or goals that we're trying to direct. And so to me, that was very clarifying in terms of that separation. The others who have interacted with this agree that that's kind of the separation between TRSU and the other boards.
Did you repeat what you said about TRSU would be directing the boards and how they want, like, what was that statement?
Yeah, that I'm probably not using the right words. That the goals that the TRSU are setting are for the other boards. as opposed to directly for the students in those separate districts.
Just, yeah, I think some, I mean, like, we're not setting the individual board's goals, but more the supervisory goals. So is that what you're trying to, okay.
Yes, and that the functions that the supervisory union is directing, like special education, I think transportation is one that falls under that those are the areas in which TRSU would be setting their goals, not necessarily goals that are like improving third grade math performance.
So, and Lane, are you still on? Good. Just so I don't misspeak, because you're more.
I'm here.
Okay, did you hear what Lisa said before I keep
Yeah.
going? Okay. So transportation would not be at the TRSU level, that'll be at the individual board levels. Is my understanding, isn't it? Am I wrong?
Well, it's required to be at the SU.
The transportation. So what about GM owning the buses, that whole debacle with? Okay. All right, I just want to make sure that's why that's why I'm asking for correction if I'm wrong. So would we be setting, the TRSU be setting, I don't even think, is that going to be, Lane, is that going to be one of the policies at the TRSU level?
If it's something that you develop, it's not a necessity, if that makes sense. So
with the-
typically, go ahead.
Well, with the transportation example, we talked about the fact that TRSU might say, we want to provide transportation to every family in the supervisory union, or the goal might be something more like, we want to provide sufficient transportation for students who attend the school who is closest to where they are. Like, there might be different level, that goal could be different things at the supervisory union. And then potentially each of the district boards could also have their own goals. Whereas for something like special education, that would be entirely at the supervisory union. And the goal might be something like, what Lane talked about previously, we are wanting to empower students who are receiving special education services to decrease their dependence on those services. And that's not something then that either Green Mountain or Ludlow Mount Holly would additionally speak to, because they aren't actually delivering those services in a direct way.
Yes, that's right, okay, all right, I think I get where you're going, okay. Right. So
I thought for transportation, though, that the individual boards did hire their own bus drivers and own their own buses.
that's why I'm a little bit confused about this.
They do, just because there's no district-wide coordinator for that. Green Mountain has their coordinator, and we don't have one for Ludlow Mount Holly. So I think if we had a full district-wide person, then all that hiring would be done at the SU level.
So then would the assets of Ludlow Mount Holly board then roll over to TRSU? Because I'm like, my memory is maybe 2 years ago, Ludlow Mount Holly had to buy a school bus from Green Mountain, which suggests to me that the assets are held individually by each board.
So the way transportation, we do a reimbursement based on expenses. All the other assessments that we do bill back are based on student enrollment or district-wide enrollment. But because Ludlow didn't have a bus for a number of years when we initially merged, that was just left to do a reimbursement back as we had it, because Ludlow wasn't going to pay for transportation that they didn't have. And that's just remained that way. And so when we buy a bus, we buy it out of the individual school thing. Although my Holly's buses are TRSU buses, Green Mountain buses are registered Green Mountain. We had a big discussion
Oh, I
about that.
remember that. That's why I was.
Joe was very passionate about
Yes.
it. It says nowhere in the law, one way or the other.
But in regards to policy making, the financials are different. I just wanted to make sure like if the TRSU was directing transportation policy, we weren't going to be stepping in adversely.
Well, can I, so sticking
Yeah.
with what Lisa said, I don't know if this makes sense, but so the transportation example, if the TRSU goal is as you described, like we're gonna provide transportation for whatever families, there still would need to be boards, district level, board specific goals about, okay, in order to do that, I need a fleet that's this big and I need to hire this many drivers, given the part of the geography that I cover. So the goals of those district boards would inform and support the TRSU goal. But it would need to be the boards who made those decisions because they're different. These are different in the two districts. So it does seem to make sense, the way you were thinking about it in this example, financials aside.
Yeah, that's what, okay. Yeah, okay, all right.
I guess the point is, yeah, the district should hire because Green Mountain would need more bus drivers and more buses than Mount Hollywood. So you would want those decisions to be made in those
And the individual boards decide, like, so if GM decides they don't want to hire, then, do we run into an issue where we're then out of compliance with?
because you can't meet the objectives of the TRSU.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, so I don't know whether this would come before or after adopting policy governance at the TRSU level, but it seems like having a description of what that scope of the TRSU policies can be, might be, should be an early part of that discussion of developing policies, because I think there is a lot of ambiguity about the interaction between the different boards.
Lane, can you speak to that? Lane's got his hand up, sorry. I can't see you on the big screen. I see your hand.
Yeah, no, sorry about that. The only reason I am not showing up is because people don't even see me hacking.
That's okay.
I think it took me a little bit of time of listening to try to understand the context. I think, and again, I'm taking a guess at it based upon what I'm hearing. I think there might be confusion about what the district's policies are in terms of how the districts interact with each other versus the policy governance policies. The policy governance policies, there are only two kinds that you're going to create. One of them deals with the ends, the goals that we are trying to achieve, usually in terms of student performance, right? You talk to the community, you did your portrait of the graduate, you've got information from them about what they'd like to see happening for their schools and their students, and that's what the ends are developed around. The other set of policies are the executive limitations, where you have delegated to the superintendent and the admin team some of your authority so that we can carry out the basic operations. And the executive limitations put the boundaries around what we're allowed to do and what we can't do. And so I think you're talking about a different set of policies potentially than what policy governance is about. Right? You got district policies in terms of how the three districts interact with each other. And then you've got this policy governance model that kind of dictates how you interact with the superintendent and how you work with him to get things done on behalf of the communities in terms of what they want for their children. Am I making any sense?
Yeah, that's a good reminder. And I think that we're falling already, starting to kind of fall back into like what we already know in regards to how policies are being set through the TRSU. So at the TRSU level, the TRSU would be setting the ends and then basically the guardrails for you. And then that's how we would evaluate you in regard when you're reporting back with those, what was the name of the report?
The ends report.
Thank you. Okay, all right, does that make more sense to everybody?
Yeah, so still just based on the conversation at the workshop, And so I was asking the question, so how do we handle the interaction between the supervisory union and the school boards, the districts? And even in terms of those ends, my understanding was that the TRSU ends would be things they are wanting of the school districts, not the direct. So the TRSU wouldn't be setting those student-focused ends. But is that just wrong? It certainly can be, but.
Can you answer that, Lane? I can't.
Usually ends are, again, if you think about the mission, right? We go out, we talk with the communities. And again, we get this picture of what they want us to do on behalf of the children. Some of the discussion might be around related to that, facilities and things along those lines. And they become the goals that are set that myself and the administrative team, work with the staff in the district to achieve. So I think there might be a little bit of confusion because the policies that are dictating the responsibilities and obligations that Green Mountain and Ludlow Mount Holly have to TRSU and that TRSU has to the two districts, those are pretty much unchanged right now. I'm sure there could be some things that could be, looked at, but they're really kind of separate, at least in my mind and the work that I've done in this from what the ends are and what the executive limitations are, which in totality is your governance policy, is policy governance.
So that's saying that the TRSU ends would be directly student related in terms of increased performance and inclusivity and whatever directions we wanted to develop that in. And so then what do the school districts do with that? Do they just say, yes, we agree and adopt that as well? Or no, we also want this other direction?
Well, I would argue, and again, the best thing to do might be to have Jeannie come in, because again, you're in a little bit different situation with the three districts. I'm kind of losing my spot here as I'm thinking, because like I said, I'm a little hazy with the COVID. But go ask me the question again, Lisa, because you had a really important point there.
Yeah, so it really is just about the interaction between the TRSU ends and the district ends.
Yeah, but you are, as members of the community that have input into the development of that mission and that vision and those goals, you have input into those ends, right? Just like the community did through the Portrait of the Graduate process. In terms of how those goals get achieved, if you're a policy governance board, then the means how we get it done is left up to administration to figure out, and your job is just to evaluate whether or not we're getting it. In the case of a board that is not policy governance, then those means, or at least some of those means, would happen through discussion with the superintendent and the decision by the board.
I guess what I'm trying to get is if all three boards adopt policy governance, and let's say a TRSU board says, hey, we want everyone to really be focused on improving literacy and language skills and writing skills. And then Green Mountain says, no, actually, we think it's more important that we're focusing on STEM areas of improvement. And Ludlow Mount Holly says, no, we actually think we should be focusing on the social and emotional skills. Then what do the TRSU ends mean if they are not adopted by the district boards?
That's a good question. I would have Jeannie answer it for you, because my sense is that there's a feeling that there is going to be a loss of control. and you can correct me if I'm wrong, which is a legitimate concern. I don't think that would happen, but I think that would be a good question for us to have Jeannie answer, to talk with you a little bit about it, because she did work directly in a district with multiple boards, some who were policy governance and some who were not. That way I'm not giving you, I can give you my best thoughts, but I also don't want to be wrong. I'd rather have you get the best information from the best possible person.
I wonder.
Would you like me to reach out to her to ask her that question? Because that was the way that you said it makes a lot of sense what you said to me, in terms of how it was formulated. So I could relay that to her.
Why don't you, Lisa, send Lane an email with the
Sure.
direct questions so that it's not lost in interpretation again?
Yep, happy to do that. And yes, it would be great for you to reach out.
Yeah, she's pretty good about connecting.
I wonder, well, what Jeannie would say, but I wonder if it would still be like the board members serve already in the capacity to represent the boards respectively, however they're run. So when the time comes, if the TRSU was policy governance, it would just be by the way the input from the members of the boards contributing to those goals.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, but that to me also means what TRSU is doing in adopting policy governance is much different in that it is basically kind of combining the input from the two boards to see where we have overlap or where we agree that we need some kind of higher level supervisory union ends. And to me, that's really different from kind of starting as a TRSU board and setting policies if we're more just gathering it from districts. Yeah, I'm not sure.
All right, well, we're not going to be able to vote on that tonight then, so we'll move on unless there's any other discussion. All right, new business. Two River Southeast Education Association has sent its intent to negotiate. Do you want to speak to that, Lane?
Yeah, it took me a minute to find my button here. So the Teachers Association has reached out to request the negotiation of a successor contract. So my recommendations based upon that, if it hasn't already been done before, because you folks have done a lot of work since before I came, but I think the first step would be to provide an overview of the process, given that there are three boards, right, negotiating with basically two different teachers union, even though their CBA is the same for both. I would vote tonight if folks are willing to agree to negotiate with the Teachers Association, and to confirm the TRSU's negotiating team members and making sure that we're clear on what powers have been delegated to them kind of in that motion. And then making sure that those that have, been chosen to represent the district for negotiations are still willing to do that, and maybe revote if people have changed their minds. And then the last thing is determining, who will represent the district, so that we can begin kind of arranging the dates and the times to meet with the union to get this process rolling. It sounds like the district has used Chris Leopold in the past, and so if the boards, if that's who they want, that would be great. It'll give me the opportunity, if the boards vote on him as the representative, to reach out and start getting some dates set up. If he's not available, then my recommendation would be Pietro Lynn. And so those are my parts and pieces, if it's helpful.
So Lane, Chris is available. I have spoken with him.
Awesome.
In the past, what we have done is had two board representatives from Ludlow Mount Holly and two from Green Mountain. And those four people negotiate for both sides of the district and the supervisory union.
So those are probably then voted on at those two individual board meetings.
Yeah,
We've already assigned
Yeah,
that to you.
in March, I think they were voted on.
I can go back and look and see who that was.
Sorry, can you identify the bargaining unit? Which unit is this?
This is the teachers
For the
for both, right? Because they negotiate a common CBA. I was talking with them the other day, so it sounds like they're both going to be there for this negotiation with whoever shows up from management side.
So even though we have two separate CBAs and two separate bargaining units, we negotiate those jointly?
So for the teachers, my understanding is yes, because you have a common teachers agreement between the two districts. They use the same one. The support staff will be different. The support staff, the two separate unions, the two master agreements are different. So my guess is those would be separated. Those would be negotiated separately.
I thought that there was some variation between the two teachers units, like from a contract language standpoint.
so there used to be, but we worked very hard over the past negotiations to bring them together so everybody's has the same benefits all the way around. And I think we've successfully done that.
And there's one bargaining agreement, there may be some certain sections and articles that have language that might still be a little bit different, but it's pretty minimal.
I think we leave them.
For the past 2 rounds of negotiations, it's been one bargaining unit, even though there's been 2 unions.
And if I remember right, it's either Lisa and Lois or Lisa and Rick on the GM board. Do you have the minutes available? If you don't, I can look it up. And I have no idea.
I can go back with Kelly tomorrow and we'll look who's in the minutes. It sounds like people are saying it's from last March.
Amber's looking right now. Wait a minute.
And I do know it's me.
I feel like Lois was on that.
I think Lois was, I think Rick was on sports now.
Yeah,
That's right.
Would you?
but I don't know if it switched at the meeting.
Oh, I think. See what case it is.
Can't remember. Okay, so while Amber's looking that up, what is it you're needing from us, Lane, at this level?
So I think at this point, if this is done between the two districts, maybe nothing.
Okay.
Who typically decides on approving, Chris Leopold to be the negotiator? Is that the TRSU board or is that done separately by the two, the LMH and Green Mountain?
I don't recall.
I don't recall her voting.
I don't recall voting on that in the past. Do you? I don't know. if we have.
What I would recommend then, because it is spending money, is potentially the TRSU board voting to provide the authority to myself along with Cheryl to engage that person.
Somebody want to make a motion for delegating authority to Cheryl and Lane to engage Chris Leopold for negotiation of contracts?
So moved.
I'll second.
Is that reasonable to you before we go any further, Lane? Is that?
Yeah, that's perfect.
All right, so all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. All right, so you guys will engage Leopold, and then the individual boards will send their representatives. Julie, do you, you've lost somebody, so I don't know if Dave is involved in that.
Amber, do you have?
I do, so I just found GM's, which is Lois and Lisa, and March. This 7 minutes.
It's on our agendas, isn't it?
Bargaining council teachers, the board will choose to table this item until next month. Okay.
We had this agenda item put on the agendas of the two districts. So we'll be able to discuss it there as well.
It looks to, so based on the September agenda, that matrix at the bottom, teachers bargaining is Jamie Dickey.
So the minutes that got approved that subsequent month talked about this is a negotiations year for both teachers and support staff. Mr. Martin and Ms. McKenzie will remain on the support staff committee. They tabled discussions with the teacher negotiations council until later in the year with the hope that vacant positions will be filled. I don't
Some
know.
of them, Holly has to address it, but GM is squared away. We have our 2 representatives. All right. So you'll bring that back to your meeting, Lisa. Julie, sorry.
Yeah, we ought to add that. Is that, Lane, did you say that's already been put on the agenda?
It should only be on the agenda. We put it on all 3 boards,
Okay.
Okay,
but I'll double check.
all right. Is there any more on that?
Nope.
Okay, all right, so then we're gonna move on to first read policies. So I don't know if anyone had the opportunity to peruse, it's just a first read, you won't be voting on it. We'll come back to this next month for the second possible adoption. I don't know if anyone read or wants to discuss anything at this point.
I can give a really brief overview of the 3 that are there, if that's helpful.
Sure.
So the wellness policy, that usually gets changed a little bit every year. It's mandated by the federal government as part of us being recipients of federal grant money. So they usually change minor things each year depending upon what the government feels is important at that time. I think the changes, I couldn't even tell between the old policy and this new one with the changes, what the changes were. But it is a mandatory one, and we've pulled the VSBA language. The electronic communications between staff and students, that is a required policy, and that wording was taken directly from the VSBA as well. The School Board Association for the state of Vermont pulls in a legal team to actually create model language for these policies, especially the mandatory ones, and we always use that language. The fire and emergency preparedness policy is similar. It's a required policy. It was mandated by the state about a year ago, following last year's, I think it was last year, the swatting incident that happened last year. And we're already in compliance with the provisions. We just need to have the policy in our manual to meet the requirements.
Any questions for Lane? And I think page 1 and 2 are backwards on here, just so you know. Any questions?
The physical activity program, is that, they wanted the 8th or the 9th, students from 9 to 10 to be in physical education for 225 minutes a week. That's probably 40 to 45 minutes a day. Is that district policy or is that like a national? Because I thought physical education was getting weaned out of schools.
Again, so this is part of the federal government. If we want to continue being recipients of the grant monies that they give us each year, not just for food, but for our consolidated federal programs, which is our title money, which is quite significant, then we have to have these provisions and be carrying them out.
And I think it's great that we're keeping it.
Yep.
So, everybody okay with moving these forward for a second read? Yes. All right. So that brings us to our next public comment. Let's see any public. All right. It's done. So is there anything else before we talk about?
So I had one quick thing just from Lane's reports that this board at this meeting needs to be providing direction on any major or specific budget constraints or directions, right? That's on the calendar for today.
Lane?
Usually, and it doesn't sound like this board may have done this in the past. If the board so desires, and this is a part of the thinking about policy governance, sometimes what the board will do is put constraints. So they won't come out and say, you can't spend any money on math programming, right? Because that might get in the way of us being able to achieve the board's goals. But sometimes the board will say, given the environment that we're in, you can do whatever you want as long as the overall budget doesn't go up by more than 3%. So some boards will put a constraint, a general constraint like that on things. And so that's kind of why that's in there, is for that consideration if this board wants to do that. I've never worked with a board that does, but I do know that many do.
Yeah, so I'm not suggesting that we would be ready to do such a thing or that we need to do such a thing. I just wanted to understand what that was. So thank you.
What you might do is if folks decide that discussion is important, is you could at this meeting, recommend that it be on the next agenda in November.
You want that?
Not particularly, no.
All right, so maybe we'll talk about it more as we go through with the path of policy governances, so we move along. Okay. Anything else? Julie? Anybody? All right, so our next meeting will be November 3rd at CTES and on Zoom. Doesn't have a time, but it's 6 p.m. And now we will do our self-evaluation. So board members are given and have read the agenda, background materials prior to the meeting. Board members are respectful of each other, the public, and the administration.
Yes.
Board members handled conflict openly and constructively. Board members focus on the role and responsibility of the board. And board members act as a team once a decision has been made and work collaboratively throughout decision-making. All right.
That, November 3rd is a Sunday.
November 7th?
I think it's the 7th.
Yeah, okay. All right. All right, Lane, will you just let Kelly know that was there? I don't know if it's gonna be on the other agendas, wrong.
Will do. May have been left over from from last year.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, all right. So unless there's something else, we can entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
All right.
All right, we are adjourned at 6:59.